Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. Today's guest is Brent Kumfer. It's great to have you today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Thank you. You are the owner and chief servant at Indiana's newest winery, the Rejoicing Vine.
Yeah.
Great to have you here today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brent. Well, going right into it, I understand you have a background in engineering.
That's correct.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I went to school for electrical engineering at Purdue. Go Purdue. Sorry for you IU folks. And spent about 15 years working in the tech world, developing and launching new products, trying to be an innovator and disruptor for large corporate clients. And I think I bring that up because that background and that mindset my wife and I both bring to the winery. And we can discuss that further, but
sure.
We try to bring a lot of innovative thinking to how we make our wines and how we serve our wines.
How did you transition from being this tech guy and you moved into being a vineyarder?
Well, the transition took several years and wasn't always planned, but at least by us. It started really with my son being born. My son, Caleb, he's now 8 years old. At the time, my wife, Frances, is an emergency medicine doctor, works a lot of nights and weekends, and we found that with a newborn and her schedule and my schedule both being very taxing, we never saw each other. And we made the decision as a family for me to step away from my career to help be at home with the kids. And it was difficult at first, but at the end it was a huge blessing. I've over the past several years was able to spend a lot more time with my son, with my wife, and now with our daughter who's 4 years old. But as they were going on to become school-aged, I had to think about what was my next step from a career standpoint. And during that whole process, I got really into learning how food was grown, learning how things were made, food products in general, particularly wine. I got kind of obsessed with winemaking at home. And as that decision point came, like we felt a calling to start a vineyard, to start a winery. So.
That's fabulous. And then tell us about how you studied that, because you have to study that. I would think you'd need more than a YouTube video to get that under your that knowledge level.
You can do surprisingly well with YouTube, but yes, when we finally made the decision, like this is going to be a big investment for the family. I did go ahead and did some coursework through UC Davis. They have an online winemaking set of classes, so I took those.
Why UC Davis?
UC Davis is kind of world renowned for their winemaking program in general. It's top of the top notch program for winemaking. And with my technical background and my history, I was able to get in and accepted into that program. Other education is just kind of like real life, like a lot of trial and error.
Sure.
At home in my basement, making a batch and studying it, learning how I can do better. Yeah.
Well, that is fascinating. How, and of course, Davis is near the Napa Valley, correct?
Yeah.
And so that has a huge impact on their agricultural program.
Yeah, so UC Davis, like Purdue, is very known in California for their agricultural, and UC Davis in particular for grape growing, viticulture, and enology, which is winemaking, because of their proximity to the Napa, Sonoma regions. Yeah, they have access to world-class vineyards and winemakers that they can train with, help educate, and yeah.
Now, your vineyard is called the Rejoicing Vine. Can you tell us about that name?
Yeah, anybody out there looking to start a business, I'll tell you that finding a name is probably one of the hardest tasks out there. I mean, from the obvious, like you have to find a name that isn't taken, that has a website available, social media handles, all of that. But so it was a long process. We had several different names, and we finally landed on the Rejoicing Vine. And for us, it's God inspired, so faith is very important to my wife, Frances, and I. And one of our favorite books in the Bible is Isaiah 55. I always liked it primarily there's a verse in there that says, "My ways are higher than yours." And that verse kind of always helped me wrestle with situations in my life that I didn't understand. As an engineer, I want to understand everything.
Sure. That's a natural for engineer.
And I always gravitated towards that verse. And it just so happened I was gravitating towards that verse at the same time we were trying to come up with a name. And I realized that chapter starts with, "Come all who are thirsty. Come and drink water and wine for free." I haven't figured out the free business model. When God reveals that to me, maybe I'll implement it.
To be able to have that. And then you're going to have a lot of business. People coming in for your free wine.
Yeah, but to wrap that up, that story, that chapter ends with basically a call to follow God. When you do follow God, it ends with the mountains bursting into song and the trees clapping their hands.
Yes.
So we took that visual and wrapped it into the name. Like when we do what's right for the community, for the environment, our vision of the end goal is walking out into a vineyard that's rejoicing, that's clapping its hands and bursting into songs around us. So.
Well, that's great. So you've got a happy property there.
Hopefully,
that's something good to wake up to every day.
Yeah,
I think that's great. Now, you just entered the world this last year. You opened.
We opened in June of 2023.
Fabulous.
So just over 6 months ago.
That's my birth month, so I always think, oh wow, another thing to celebrate.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
That's fabulous. Now is Frances involved in the farming and etc. Involved with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're co-owners. Frances is there. Any chance she can get to help. She does have a full-time career. She's still a physician, so she works clinically. She also does research in the medical industry. So her schedule's quite full.
Does she do surgery on the grape?
Maybe someday, yeah. It does take 4 years. Most people don't realize we planted our vineyard. We have about 2 acres, but it does take 4 years before your first harvest. So,
wow.
We're still waiting on that first harvest where she can do her grape surgery. But,
we'll be learning more about that in chapter 2. But that is fabulous, and we'll also learn more about all that you provide at your vineyard. And so we're going to take a quick break right now. And we'll be back after this break with our interview with Brent Kumfer, the owner of the Rejoicing Vine. We'd like to thank you for your support of the Omnibus Show. We are now in Season 2. In Season 1, we had a great variety of guests, including a patisserie owner, we had an Olympian, we had politicians and artists, we had writers, and we had more. In our second season, we look forward to having guests from here and abroad. And they will be also in a wide variety of backgrounds, bringing more and more knowledge and experience so that you can enjoy this. Also, we'll be expanding our platforms onto X, which you know is Twitter, and Instagram as well. So thank you very much, and we look forward to Season 2 with you on the Omnibus Show. Hello and welcome back to Chapter 2 of the Omnibus Show. This week's guest is Brent Kumfer, the owner of the Rejoicing Vine. And to pick up from our conversation, because there's wine is very interesting. We could talk about that for hours, but I promise I won't.
Especially if we opened a bottle.
Yeah, especially. And so what's dear to you is about how you make the wine and the process of it and everything with your vineyard. Can you please tell us about your view and what your goals are for that?
Sure. So for us, with owning the winery, how we get to the finished product is just as important as the finished product. One of the things that you'll notice right away at our winery that's different is we've chosen to specialize in sparkling wines.
Okay.
The reason for that is not because we just love sparkling wines, although we do love sparkling wines. Everything we do, all of our decisions at the winery are filtered through our mission. Our mission, one of the core missions is to be good stewards of our resources. That includes our finances as well as our land. And where sparkling wine comes in is being good stewards with our land and building a product that's more sustainable. So with sparkling, we can source our grapes from this region. So we get most of our grapes come from Indiana or Michigan. The thing about growing grapes in Indiana or Michigan is we don't have the nice warm summers that California has. We also get a lot more rainfall than California has. So the grape varieties that do well here tend to produce a juice that's high in acid and low in tannins. What that means from a winemaking perspective is it's very difficult to make a big California red style wine. California reds have lots of tannins. They're low in acids and very high in sugar as well.
So that means very sweet wine, basically.
For Indiana.
Well, I mean for the California. That's a sweeter wine.
A sweeter juice. Sweeter juice. Ultimately, it leads to a higher alcohol wine that can be oaked. Oak and acids don't play well together, so if you have a high acid, you can't do a lot of oaking. But what we found was that profile from this region was very good with sparkling wines. So that was the first thing. Well, if we focused on sparkling, we could source all of our fruit local. Shipping grapes from California or juice from California, in my mind, is not very sustainable. It's not very good stewardship when we can get fruit locally. And that's kind of more the view of the old world style of winemaking, isn't it? Yeah.
So you make your vineyards in the region, in the county, in the the region, and Champagne, Bordeaux, etc. And you have your grapes are from there.
Yeah, it's working with the resources that you have in your terroir or your region. It's more of a traditional style of winemaking. The other thing with sparkling that we found that really kind of tipped us over the edge of like, yes, we're going all in on sparkling, was the packaging. So I did a lot of research as an engineer, reading articles and looking at publications on the carbon footprint of wine. What I found was that a majority of the footprint of wine, up to 70%, I've seen, comes from the packaging, from the bottle. Bottles are heavy, they're made of glass, so they have to be packaged very carefully and shipped. Often they're shipped from other countries.
So you don't have the bottles made near here regionally?
There's
bottle makers for the proper bottles are all over?
There are some in the U.S. I would say they're more difficult to find. We do source our bottles from the U.S., but it wasn't easy to find someone, especially champagne bottles. They tend to be manufactured overseas. But with sparkling wines, we can serve wines out of kegs. So we use stainless steel
kegs. So you'll
kegs.
be popular on college campus.
Yeah, perhaps.
Now the kegs are made of
stainless steel. Yeah, so we use stainless steel kegs, very similar to beer making. When you come to the tasting room, we have a tasting room on the northwest side of Indianapolis, just south of Zionsville. But when you come there, most of our wines, 4 out of the 5 wines we have, are served out of kegs.
Okay.
So these are stainless steel kegs. The wine never sees a glass bottle. In just the 6 months that we operated in 2023, we were able to save 900 pounds of glass.
Wow.
From the landfill.
Wow.
Yeah, so we think we can do a lot with that from a sustainability standpoint. We're eliminating somewhere between 50 and 70% of the carbon footprint of our wines by doing the kegs. We do still sell out of glass bottles for carry out.
That'd be the fifth one?
Yeah,
you ferment in the bottle.
One of the wines we make is a champagne style wine. Champagne style production is bottle fermented, so hard to remove the bottle from a bottle fermented wine.
Yeah,
but we'll be trying to innovate on that someday. But yeah,
well, that's very interesting. And for those who don't know, because there's a particularity with champagne. They kind of have a copyright on that name. So if a white wine or rosé, it's sparkling and it's from the Champagne region, it's proper to call it champagne. We like to, the Italians have Prosecco and the other regions have Clément, and we usually use the term sparkling wine. Sparkling wine is any sparkling champagne type of wine outside of Champagne in France.
yeah.
So this is really, really, really fascinating to learn.
Yeah.
Because I always love learning about that. So carry on with. I'm really interested because you've talked about this sustainability. How do you farm differently than traditional farms? I'm talking about the soil at this point.
Great question, Dave. So we use a practice that's referred to as regenerative farming. Regenerative farming is all about, in our mind, building life. One of our slogans at the winery is cultivate life. We cultivate life, we try to cultivate life in the winery with our patrons and our guests, but we also try to cultivate life out in the vineyard through regenerative farming. So the principles of regenerative farming are basically keep the soil healthy. So you do that by keeping it covered, by keeping living roots in the soil. One thing that people don't often realize is there's a whole ecosystem below the ground. Whether it's bacteria, fungi, all of those things. Our culture tends to think of bacteria and fungus as negative things, but they can
Particularly fungus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but they can be very positive.
Sure.
And
just not in the windowsill.
it's just not on your windowsill or behind your walls.
Exactly.
Right, but in the grounds where they're supposed to be very positive, those that microbiome actually is what feeds the plants in a natural system. The plants are trading their sugars that they make from the sunlight with microbes in the soil for all of their nutrition. Traditional farming tends to break that cycle. So practices like...
That would be traditional farming as we understand it today, with the trucks and all the plows.
With the big equipment, the tillage, the
Yeah.
chemicals, the pesticides, the
Now,
fertilizers.
what's the differentiator there? How is that? You've talked about keeping the land. What's the difference between that style and how you, like, what are they doing to the soil that, because I do know that a problem we have in our contemporary farming is depletion of nutrients in the soil.
Yeah.
But you know this better than I do, so take it away.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you think about the soil life in general, what does life need? It needs shelter, stable shelter, it needs food, and it needs water, at the very basic. Tillage is a common practice in traditional farming. Tillage is where you get into the soil with usually a metal blade, rotating blade, and you just chop it up, right? So you're chopping up. And the thought is like you're improving the soil somehow. The reality is you're basically taking the homes of all those microbes, particularly fungi are very impacted by this because they're long strands of life.
Gotcha.
And you're chopping it up and just destroying it, right? So you're destroying the shelter. For food, if you plant a monocrop system, so let's say
Corn or wheat
corn, wheat, or even in a vineyard, all you have is grapes.
I see.
Right? A traditional vineyard might look like a bunch of rows of grapes with bare soil under the grapevines.
Oh, yeah. And it's growing up.
And it's growing. So directly below the vines, the dirt there, or the soil, the only thing those microbes have to feed on is the grape roots.
I see.
And grapes only grow certain periods of the year.
Yeah.
So in regenerative farming, one of the key practices is diversity. So you want to feed those microbes the whole year if you can. In Indiana, we get a little bit of dormancy during this time of year. But
when do grapes grow in Indiana?
They're growing typically from bud break is in middle of May. Harvest is roughly September, depending on the variety. But if you can have roots in the ground from other plants, clover, for instance, is growing in the cooler season, so it might be growing from March to May. Basically, you're trying to feed those microbes with the plants.
So you don't use Roundup on that clover. You let it thrive along with.
Yeah, dandelions are great.
Are they great?
But the other thing is
dandelion wine.
Like, think about the issue we have today with bees. I mean, how many bees and pollinators do you see in suburbia that's filled with a single blade of grass that is identical throughout? I mean, there's no flowers, there's no food.
Right,
for a pollinator, suburbia is like a desert. There's no food.
We've got one on 116th Street. Have you seen it? They have, what do you call it, a colony? We've got a whole crowd of bees out there.
Good.
On 116th Street.
Yeah, we're doing better.
I have a cousin in Michigan that has bees.
Yeah.
But he's right on the border of a wetland. So he can't expand. He's just right there on the border.
Yeah.
But with the wetland, there's all kinds of things
That's
out
awesome.
there.
Yeah. So, but on a farm, a regenerative farm, what we're trying to do is build that diversity. So the things that my herd, as I call it, in the soil, my microbes, are being fed. My pollinators are getting flowers from March through October, as long as I can, right?
Sure.
If all I have is grapes, they flower for about 2 weeks in May. But if I have clover, if I have dandelions, if I have, we grow zinnias and sunflowers on
Oh,
our
nice.
farm. There's food sources for those pollinators
Sure.
throughout the year. So that's one of the principles of regenerative farming. Something you'll see different at our farm. You won't see that bare soil under the vines.
Gotcha.
We have what some might call weeds.
It's like a strawberry. Is it like strawberry plants where it's on the ground?
We have a wide variety of
Okay.
plants. Yeah.
So you
yeah.
different.
And it's
but-
not just grasses. Like we have all sorts of.
Sure.
Yeah.
What you're talking about of growing through the land, what does that do to the grape that would be different from the more contemporary farming? Does
Yeah.
it make it hardier? Does it give you a fuller juice?
So my belief, it takes about 4 years for
For it to develop.
for grapes to develop till
Yeah.
you get a harvest. I have not seen anyone doing this in this area of the country, nor have I seen studies that show what it does. So, what my belief though is that the healthier the soil, and I've seen this with other plants other than grapes, but the healthier the soil, the healthier the plant. Think about our own bodies. If all we're eating is junk food, our bodies are not going to be healthy. It's going to be harder for us to fight off diseases and any pressure that comes from the outside world. And
Especially
I believe
immunity.
immunity, yeah. So I believe that our plants with a healthier soil will be healthier. That means they're more resistant to disease. They're more resistant to or more tolerant of pest pressure, so insects.
Sure.
Because
they're part of the process.
yeah.
Bees and everything else.
Yeah, the other thing is too, with this regenerative approach, one of the things you try to avoid at all costs is something like a pesticide or insecticide.
So you don't use pesticides or insecticides.
Correct.
And what's the difference by doing that?
At the end of the day, I believe our grapes will be more nutrient dense, more flavorful, and ultimately we'll be pulling, from a sustainability standpoint, we'll be pulling more carbon out of the air and putting it into the ground. What really got me on this track was I saw studies by some European countries that showed if farmers adopted this regenerative practice, we could completely reverse climate change without doing any cuts to our way of life.
Okay.
So you could still drive the car you're driving, you could still consume all the things you're consuming. Just with regenerative farming, we can take enough carbon out of the air and put it into the soil to reverse climate change.
Well, the trees and the plants are actually dependent upon CO2. It's sort of like the tree breathes in CO2 and breathes out oxygen.
Sure.
So that's
But it's good to
Sure.
have the balance, and I think where I was headed before with the lack of pesticides and insecticides, for instance, is, and it goes to the diversity, is insecticides, for instance. You have a particular pest. Like if I grow all grapes, the pest that's going to thrive is going to be the pest that feeds on grapes or benefits from grapes in some way. Because that's what they have. But the predator to that pest will also then begin to thrive, right? But if I use an insecticide, they generally are non-specific, which means they kill, if it's an insecticide, it kills every insect or just about every insect on the farm, including the predators to the pest. Well, the pests tend to rebound quicker than the predators because their food source is readily available, the grapes. And so I end up on this chemical treadmill where because the pests recover quicker, I have to spray to take care of them, but then I kill the predators. And then, so I'm on this treadmill now of I have to spray insecticide.
And that also affects the groundwater.
It affects the soil as well, the groundwater. So there's all these other chain reactions or things down the chain that those chemicals affect. And so for me, those are, rather than those being something that's just standard practice, those to me are like the last possible resort.
Gotcha. Well, Brent, this is fascinating. I'm learning about farming, about the different ways of contemporary farming. Can you please tell us now about your facility and what all you do there, and what will be coming up?
Yeah.
Now that we're into 2024.
Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned before, a tasting room on the northwest side of Indianapolis. Really, we're off of 465 at 86th Street. You can get to us less than maybe 2 miles. And then off 65 at 71st Street, we're about 2 miles. So like anywhere in the greater Indianapolis area, I say we're 20 to 30 minutes from anybody.
Wow. That's good. Well, we'll put your link in the description notes.
Yeah.
And so that will...
But we have a farm and tasting room there, so you can come. The tasting room's open year-round. We're open Friday. Right now we're open Friday, Saturday, Sundays. You can come in. You can enjoy a glass of wine. You can enjoy a bottle. You can do flights or tastings to try all of our different wines.
So we can have one of each.
Yeah, we can line them all up, and you can
Very
see
nice.
what you like the best.
Very fun.
We have a lot of events going on. We have live music every Friday night.
Very nice.
We have a variety of what I would consider like arts and crafts style events, painting, bubbles and brushes.
That's great for families.
Cookie decorating.
And friends getting together.
Yeah, absolutely. The winery is kid friendly, so you can bring your kids. The only requirement is they have to be with an adult, of 21 or older. Right. We have an outdoor space, which is great in the summertime. And then we have our vineyards, which people are welcome to go in and learn more or see more. We do vineyard tours and winery tours. If they want to learn more about regenerative farming, I'm there just about every day and willing to talk.
Well, that's really fascinating.
The cool part about regenerative farming is it's not something that's only applicable to a commercial farmer. Someone who has a garden or even landscaping, you can take some of these practices and implement them in your home. So I find people are very interested in that.
Yeah, I mean that you could probably do a course or a book on that alone. Seriously,
maybe someday.
Yeah, no, that would be really fabulous. Well, best of success to you.
Thank you.
And your family on this, and this should be a wonderful going into your first full year.
Yes.
In the vineyard, this will be exciting. And before we close out, could you tell us about this wine that you've brought with
I brought
us
one of
today?
our best sellers.
Great.
This is our Millions of Peaches wine. This is a bubbly wine that we back sweeten with peach juice.
Oh.
So back sweetening is just the process where at the end of the winemaking, if we decide, hey, this is a little too acidic for most people's palates, we can add a little bit of sweetness. That can be done for us, some of our wines we use organic sugar to back sweeten, others we use juice. So in this case, we use peach juice. And it's a delightful wine. It's not overly sweet, just enough sweetness there to give it really good balance. And I think for me, this is as close as you can get to biting into a fresh tree-ripened peach.
Wow. We'll have to try that out. Now, you have something here that's unique to sparkling wine champagnes, is you've got a cap on top. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, so like with the farming style and the choice of sparkling wines, everything we do is mission focused, mission filtered. So when we look at how are we going to package our wines, we ask ourselves what opportunities are there for it to be more sustainable. And we saw the crown cap often seen on beer bottles. Many people don't realize it's often used in champagne making as an intermediate cap before it gets the cork.
It gets the cork.
Yeah, so with champagne you ferment twice, first in a tank and then in a bottle. The second fermentation gives you the bubbles. So the crown cap will be used in that part. And then at the end, when they're adding that sweetness, in champagne making, it's called a dosage. That's when they remove the cap, they remove the yeast, and they add in the sweetness. At that point is when it actually gets what most people see, which is the mushroom
cork,
the mushroom-shaped cork,
Yeah.
the cage, and often a foil. So from our perspective, the crown cap does a perfectly good job of sealing, which is what we're going after. It's less waste, and it's made from stainless steel, which can be recycled.
That's great. So you don't need a cork, then?
A cork is not necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating to learn about. I think we're looking forward to sampling the vintage. Well, this is great. Well, Brent, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Omnibus Show with Brent Kumfer, the owner of the Rejoicing Vine. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael. We're shooting today from Feinstein's, and we look forward to being with you on our next episode of the Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.